Welcome back. It was a crime which pushed everything else off the front pages. 3 men, all known criminals, found shot dead in the Essex countryside. It was a cold-blooded, professional killing. The victims had many enemies, but which one wanted them executed?
And welcome back to a new video on the Essex Boys case. As always, if you are enjoying the content, please do give the video a thumbs up. And if you're interested in the Essex Boys case, or simply true crime in general, don't forget to hit the subscribe button below. On the surface, there was nothing to link Leah Betts and Tony Tucker during their brief lives. Leah was a bright, hard-working and popular student from a loving home. Tucker was a villain who ran a security business with links to the underworld. But their deaths, both related to ecstasy, dramatically exposed the corrupting influence of the illegal drugs industry. They opened the door to a sophisticated multi-million-pound empire which controlled supply in countless clubs and pubs across Essex. It was a business which rewarded its big players with sports cars and luxury hotels, and its victims, like Leah, with a painful death. Only when Tucker fell out with his suppliers did he suffer his own violent death. Within weeks of Tucker, Tate and Rolfe's bodies being found in a country lane, police were linking their deaths with the search for the suppliers of the drug that killed Leah on her 18th birthday. At first, the trio's drugs operation seemed to be small scale, but police soon discovered their links to a much larger web of suppliers. Tucker, they learned, was a drugs wholesaler, assisted by Tate and Rolfe. He bought large quantities of amphetamines, ecstasy and cannabis and sold them on to dealers. There were massive profits in buying at cost price and selling on at near retail price. A £2 ecstasy pill could fetch £15 in a nightclub. For the middleman, there was also less risk of arrest. But it was Tucker's lucrative sideline that linked him to Leah's death. He would sell rights to certain dealers to work from clubs where he had a security interest. Raquel's nightclub in Basildon, where the ecstasy pill that killed Leah was bought, was one. A police source told the Mail, quote, "Tucker and his team didn't put pills directly into the mouths of young clubbers, but by allowing dealers to operate in return for a fee, it made them as guilty as if he had passed them on personally." Tucker's bank balance was further buoyed by his role as boxer Nigel Benn's minder and security man. It is estimated his dual operation was providing him with more than £7,000 a month. 3 years ago, business was booming enough for Tucker to afford the black Porsche registered TT9, which became his trademark, and a £250,000 home in Fobbing, Essex. Police were originally met with a wall of silence from both the dead men's associates and underworld figures. But working with customs officers, they discovered that one of the trio's associates was a man named Mickey the Pilot. The information proved crucial. Mickey the Pilot, whose real name is Michael Steele, emerged as one of the men with everything to gain from both Tate, Rolfe and Tucker's deaths. Tucker had planned to buy a major amount of drugs from Steele, but it was a fateful contact that was to end in a blood-splattered Range Rover in December 1995. After one consignment was received, Tate and Tucker approached a number of financial backers to raise money for a second and much larger batch of drugs. They canvassed underworld figures for financial support and collected £70,000 before asking Steele for the next batch. The consignment proved to be the catalyst that sparked their deaths. The drugs, claimed a furious Tucker and Tate, were of poor quality, and having dumped them in an Essex lake, they demanded their money back. Steele refused, and as the threats between the two gangs escalated, Tucker's associate Tate began to get dangerously out of control. Just before he died, he rang the London Pizza Company in Basildon and demanded a 12-inch pizza sliced into 6 with different toppings on each slice. He simply wanted cheese, you cunt. Told that it couldn't be done, he appeared in person 10 minutes later and attacked 23-year-old pizza worker Roger Ryle, smashing his face into a glass plate and throwing a till across the room. Tate's reputation was sufficiently well known that the terrified Ryle refused to press charges, but the criminals saw it as the sort of behaviour which might expose them all. With murder in mind, Steele and his friend Jack Womes suggested meeting Tate, Tucker and Rolfe to discuss another deal which might appease them. The man who drove Steele and Womes to the rendezvous, who later turned informer, subsequently told police how he received a mobile phone call to return to the same spot on a farm track at Rettendon Essex to collect them. Only then did he realise it had been a ploy to kill the three men. As the killers took off their bloodied surgical gloves and prepared to dispose of the shotgun, he heard Steele boast, quote, "They won't mess with us anymore." He then listened as both men described shooting their targets at point-blank range. Police estimated the triple killing had taken less than 3 seconds. Tony Tucker, sitting in the front passenger seat, still had his mobile phone cradled between his thighs. Pat Tate was slumped against a window in the rear seat. He was not carrying his trademark pistol, suggesting he had felt comfortable about the meeting. The legacy of the deaths will see an estimated £300,000 spent on giving the informant and his family fresh identities and police protection until they can melt into a new existence hundreds of miles from Essex. Last night, the cost was defended by Detective Superintendent Ivan Dibley, who conducted the murder inquiry. Quote, "If that's the sort of money that sees drug-running killers off the streets, then it might ultimately give young people like Leah Betts a better chance." The following newspaper article is from the 21st of the 1st, 1998, with the headline, "Trial lays bare murky and ruthless world of the dealers in death." 2 ruthless hitmen were jailed for life at the Old Bailey yesterday for the underworld executions of 3 drug barons on a remote Essex farm track. Michael Steele, 55, and Jack Womes, 36, both protested their innocence from the dock, as Mr. Justice Hidden told them, "You are responsible for taking away the lives of your victims in a violent and summary way. They had crossed your path and you showed them no mercy. The fact they were criminals involved in drug trading meant they were subject to criminal law, but not to their lives being ended in the way you chose. There is about these killings a hard and ruthless criminal edge. You are each dangerous men who have not the slightest compunction in resorting to extreme violence when necessary." Steele, who likened himself to the angel of death in getting rid of the sort of people you would not want around, and his henchman Womes had fired 8 shots at close range into the heads of the trio as they waited in their Range Rover on the track in Rettendon in December 1995. Their victims, Patrick Tate, 37, Anthony Tucker, 38, and Craig Rolfe, 26, all from Essex, were killed with cold and merciless efficiency during a festering row over a smuggled shipment of poor quality cannabis. As the jury of 8 women and 4 men returned unanimous guilty verdicts to the murder charges, Womes, a self-employed mechanic from Brockford, Suffolk, and Steele, a self-employed engineer from Clacton-on-Sea, Essex, shook their heads. When they were sentenced, they again protested their innocence. Mr. Justice Hidden recommended they serve a minimum of 15 years. The jury had spent 5 days deliberating at the end of a trial which lasted more than 4 months and cost an estimated £1.5 million. Steele and Womes, along with Peter Corey, 45, also from Clacton, were also convicted of conspiring with others to import cannabis into the UK in 1995. Sentence on that charge was adjourned. It was the only charge which Corey faced, and he was remanded for reports. Andrew Munday QC, prosecuting, had told the trial when it opened, quote, "Dealing in drugs is not an honourable trade. It is often the province of the double cross, the sting and the double deal. They are all stock in trade for those who deal in drugs." The 3 men found murdered in a Range Rover parked in a remote lane off the A130 were known villains from South Essex and could have been victims of a gangland killing. But police refused to comment this morning on speculation that the murders in the quiet village of Rettendon are linked to drug dealing connected with the death of teenager Leah Betts. One of the dead men was Patrick Tate, 37, of Gordon Road, Basildon, who had convictions for having cocaine with intent to supply and robbery. The others were Craig Rolfe, 26, of Calshot Avenue, Chafford 100, and Anthony Tucker, 38, of High Road, Fobbing. Tucker was a former bodyguard to boxer Nigel Benn. Murder inquiry detectives are keeping an open mind on the possibility that the men who were discovered at Workhouse Lane yesterday morning were shot point blank by someone from the criminal underworld. Detective Superintendent Ivan Dibley said, "It is a possibility, but there are a number of possibilities. This was no ordinary murder. These men were enticed to their deaths. But a police spokesman, when asked about allegations that the killings were connected to an ecstasy drugs ring, said, "We are fully aware of the suggestions being made, but we have nothing new to say at the moment." The killings come just 2 months after a man dressed in a clown suit shot a patient at St Andrew's Hospital in Billericay, which was another gangland action. The bodies were found by a farmer and his friend as they drove up the snow-covered track near Wickford. The 2 men in the front were upright with gunshot wounds to the head. The third man was slumped across the back seat. There are no tracks from any other vehicle or footprints leading away from the scene, which is metres from the busy A130. One of the dead men was the known owner of the metallic blue vehicle, though he was not the registered owner. It was bought from Eastern Garages at 5 Bells Vange around a month ago and had the registration F424 NPE. Tate was hunted by police for over a year after a daring escape from Billericay Court on a motorbike. He was eventually tracked down in Gibraltar and returned to this country. Police have not recovered the weapon used to shoot the men, who were in casual clothes and were not wearing seatbelts, and they do not know the motive for the killings. Mr. Dibley, who is running the investigation with 30 officers, said at a press conference last night, "We still don't know the motive, but this may become clearer when we have positively identified these men." The window behind the front passenger seat was broken and shotgun cartridges were found near the scene. The dead men had not been tied or restrained with ropes, and there was no sign of a struggle. Mr. Dibley added, "Whoever killed these 3 people is clearly a very dangerous man, and until we catch him, I am concerned that he is at large." Not too many things to add to this particular article, but at the end there it mentions that Detective Inspector Ivan Dibley was incredibly concerned because the man at large he deemed would be very dangerous. Well, considering he supposedly knew who was responsible for this murder within sort of 36 hours of the crime taking place, and then he let this man out on the loose for months until his eventual arrest, I do find that a little bit hard to believe. Anyway, let's continue with the next article. The next article comes from the same date, with the headline, "Horror on Farm Track as 3 men are shot in Range Rover." 3 men found dead in a Range Rover are believed to be drug dealers executed by contract killers, it was revealed last night. Detectives think they were lured into an ambush and shot dead as they sat in the vehicle in an Essex country lane. They suspect the killings were the result of a dispute among the drug dealers. All 3 men are believed to be Essex criminals, and the country's coast is among the favoured routes for drug smuggling. The trio were found slumped in their seats shortly before 8 AM yesterday in the village of Rettendon near Chelmsford, by 2 men who were going to feed pheasants. All 3 victims, aged between 20 and 40, had been blasted at point-blank range in the back of the head with a shotgun. Detective Superintendent Ivan Dibley, who is leading the murder hunt, said they had yet to be formally identified, but were thought to be known criminals. Quote, "This is not an ordinary murder by anyone's standards," he said. "It looks as if they had been enticed down there, or maybe an arrangement had been made for them to be down there." He said he was unsure whether more than one person was responsible. One window on the metallic blue F-registered Range Rover had been smashed, and police believe the men were shot where they sat, 2 in the front seats and 1 in the back. Forensic experts searched for clues and a weapon under a fresh fall of snow in the undergrowth surrounding the lane, which leads off the A130 Chelmsford to Southend Road. Bricklayer Kenneth Jiggins and his friend farmer Peter Theobald stumbled on the scene as they went to feed Mr. Theobald's pheasants. Mr. Jiggins, 47, from South Woodham Ferrers, said, "I got out of the car to tap on the Range Rover to ask them to move it. There was no response. I called back to Peter and he said, 'There's 2 men in here. They've been shot and it looks like they're dead.' There was blood on their faces and chests. Mr. Theobald, 44, who owns nearby White House Farm, noticed a 3rd man in the back seat. It was fairly obvious what had happened. He said it was pretty shocking. For all the world, it looked like they were just asleep in the car. It wasn't until you looked closer that you could see they'd been shot." The Range Rover, with the bodies still inside, was transported by truck from the scene to Broomfield Hospital mortuary in Chelmsford. Last night, the bodies were still in the car. They were being examined by Home Office pathologist Dr. Paula Lanas. The next newspaper article comes again from the same date, with the heading, "Gangland Clue to Men Shot Dead in Range Rover." Three men were shot in the head as they sat in a car after apparently being lured to a remote farm track in Essex. The men, thought to be criminals, were found shortly before 8 AM yesterday. A farmer and his friend were going to feed their pheasants at White House Farm Rettendon near Chelmsford when they discovered the blue 7-year-old Range Rover with the men slumped inside. The identities of the men, all believed to come from South Essex, and details of their previous convictions were not disclosed. Detective Superintendent Ivan Dibley, who is leading the investigation into what is believed to be a gangland killing, said it was not an ordinary murder. It appears that they were enticed to go down the lane, or an arrangement was made for them to be there. Shotgun cartridges were found in the snow near the car, which was parked 250 yards down Workhouse Lane. The track runs from the main south end of Chelmsford Road to a private fishing lake. Police believe that the men were shot at point-blank range in the car. The murderer, possibly with an accomplice, is then understood to have driven away. "We don't know if we are looking for one perpetrator or two," Mr. Dibley said. "We also don't know whether somebody arrived in the same vehicle as the victims or came in their own." The track in which a hijacked lorry was dumped several years ago was so narrow that police were unable to take the bodies from the Range Rover to carry out a post-mortem examination. Instead, the men, all white and aged between 20 and 40, were left inside the car. The vehicle was covered with a green tarpaulin and taken to South Woodham Ferrers for examination 6 hours after the bodies were found. Peter Theobald, the farmer who found the bodies, and his friend Ken Jiggins, a bricklayer, thought that the Range Rover belonged to fishermen when they saw it blocking the track. Quote, "We were driving down the farm track to feed the birds," Mr. Jiggins, 44, said. "The Range Rover was parked close to a locked gate which leads to the lake. We thought that perhaps it was a fisherman, but they all have their own keys. I got out, walked up to the Range Rover and tapped on the window and told them to move it. There was no response. I looked in and then walked back to Peter and told him that there are two people in there who by the looks of it had been shot dead. Peter got out of the car, walked up to the vehicle and he looked inside and said, 'There's one in the back as well.' We got hold of the police and told them what we had seen." People living nearby said they had heard nothing on Wednesday night or early yesterday morning. Ron Foe, owner of Rettendon Hall, said, "We are shooting people. It would not be that unusual to hear guns at night. People go lamping for rabbits and foxes. We're into shotguns, but we heard nothing." Okay, just a couple of things to pick up on regarding this statement. I guess the first thing to remember is that this is still incredibly early on. This article was published on December the 8th, so the information that the reporter got for this actual article probably would have been gained on December the 7th, the day that the bodies were discovered. But already we're hearing talk from Detective Inspector Ivan Dibley that the person who committed this triple murder may have had a possible accomplice. They may have actually arrived in the Range Rover and then drove away in their own vehicle, which actually turned out, according to the official narrative, to be the truth. Jack Womes and Michael Steele were down the lane whilst Darren Nichols was waiting in a car nearby. I guess you need to ask yourself, would that be one of the first things that you would consider as an investigator in this case? Bearing in mind this is the first day that the bodies were discovered, would you naturally believe or even consider that someone may have travelled down there in the Range Rover? What would make you believe that there was a car parked close by if you didn't see any footprints entering or exiting the lane itself? When the first responding officers attended that crime scene, they certainly didn't actually mention or spot any sign of anyone walking up to the Range Rover or away from this Range Rover. What would give you the impression that there would be a car parked nearby in order to make their escape? You could say that would be pure common sense, but there was not actual any forensic or physical evidence to point in that direction. Another snippet of information which is mentioned in this article is the fact that the low loader was used in order to take the Range Rover away with the bodies inside, because apparently the lane was too narrow in order to remove the bodies there and then and conduct a safe post-mortem. It also states that the bodies were taken away around 6 hours after they were discovered. And that's what I mean when I state at the beginning of this video that all of these articles will give you a similar background, as in a Range Rover was found with 3 dead individuals inside. But each article adds a little piece of additional information. The next article is again from the same date, the 8th of December 1995, with the headline, "Murdered Drugsmen Linked to Leah Death." 3 men found dead in a Range Rover in a gangland-style murder were today revealed to be ecstasy barons suspected of providing the drug to tragic Leah Betts. Patrick Tate, Craig Rolfe and Anthony Tucker were shot in the head at point-blank range after apparently being lured to a remote farm track near the village of Rettendon Essex, possibly to discuss a drugs deal. Their bodies were found in a blood-splattered 7-year-old metallic blue Range Rover early yesterday on a snowy track 4 miles from Leah's home in Latchington, outside Chelmsford. Murder squad detectives said all were known criminals, and police sources today confirmed that they'd been involved in ecstasy dealing in local nightclubs like Raquel's in Basildon, where Leah bought a fatal ecstasy tablet on her 18th birthday last month. Tate, 37, from Basildon, was known as a hardened criminal who punched his way out of a court 7 years ago as he was due to stand trial on robbery and drug possession charges. The bodies were discovered at 8 a.m. yesterday by farmer Peter Theobald and his friend Ken Jiggins on their way to feed pheasants on the remote, snowy, tree-lined track running across bleak open farmland. Shotgun cartridges were found scattered in the snow. Detective Chief Superintendent Ivan Dibley said he believed the men were shot in the car and that the killer would have escaped in a vehicle of his own. "I don't know if we are looking for one perpetrator or two," he added. "Whoever has killed 3 people clearly is a very dangerous man. To that extent, until such a time we catch him, I am concerned that he is at large." Extra police officers were today drafted in as the hunt was stepped up. Mr. Jiggins, a 44-year-old bricklayer, told how he stumbled across the car on the lonely track known locally as Workhouse Lane. It is known as a favourite rendezvous point for criminals and in summer for courting couples. Okay, now in this article, again, Detective Inspector Ivan Dibley is mentioning, quote, that they believe that they would have escaped in their own vehicle. Now, I guess logically, that is the most common occurrence, isn't it? If a triple murder is committed down a farm track, then they're going to be looking to get away as quickly as possible. But in a situation and at a location like that, where you have so many different points of entry and exit, and the fact that they didn't actually have any tyre tracks entering or exiting the crime scene itself, I guess it is a bit of an assumption to start saying that they would have travelled in their own car, they would have exited or left in their own car, although it probably is, as I say, the most logical explanation. They didn't have any forensic evidence to back that up or to even really lead to that conclusion. It's also worth remembering that when Darren Nichols said that he pulled into this part of the lane here, there were no tyre tracks found matching that vehicle that he claims that he was driving that night. All that we have there is a suspicious high-performance tyre. That is the only real suspicious tyre track that is found down the entirety of Workhouse Lane. The next article is again from the 8th of December 1995, with the headline, "3 shot dead in drug trap, blown away." 3 men were executed in a gangland ambush yesterday, just 2 miles from a huge drugs drop. Each had been blasted in the head with a shotgun as they sat in their metallic blue Range Rover. One of the victims was a former bodyguard of boxer Nigel Benn, called Tony Tucker. Hardman Tucker was gunned down with 2 associates after being lured to what detectives believe was a drugs deal down a lonely farm track used by courting couples. Known cocaine dealer Patrick Tate, 37, who also had form for robbery, was another found dead in the blood-splattered Range Rover, with third man Craig Rolfe. The trio, unable to turn round in the narrow lane, were trapped like rats when the killers opened fire through the windows of the vehicle. As police searched for clues, footprints and tyre marks in the thawing snow, they were looking at links with a £1 million cannabis haul in and around the nearby pond 7 weeks ago. Detectives believe the drugs could have been part of a big shipment lost as it was dropped from a low-flying plane. Or it may have been left by a bungling gang who forgot which pond they hid it in. The track where the blood-soaked Range Rover was discovered in Essex early yesterday led to an isolated fishing lake owned by farmer Peter Theobald of White House Farm. It was discovered by Mr. Theobald and farmhand Ken Jiggins. The cannabis was found scattered at nearby Tanfield Tye in West Hanningfield. Farmer Jan Houstrup, who found it, said he believed the drugs were linked to the killings. Dutch-born Mr. Houstrup said, "First of all, we found a little parcel of drugs when we were doing some hedges. I put it on the fire. Then we found another piece the size of a video cassette in my pond. Police later recovered a staggering 53 packets of cannabis wrapped in black plastic and weighing 336 pounds. Divers found a further 19 packets. One police officer said, "I've never seen anything like this before, it's remarkable." Police are now trying to discover if the killings were connected with a shooting some days ago near a Little Chef cafe when 3 men were seen running away. The bodies in the Range Rover were found just 300 yards from the busy A130 Chelmsford to Southend Road at Rettendon Essex. The near side rear window had been shot out. 2 bodies were in the front of the vehicle and 1 was in the back. Detective Superintendent Ivan Dibley said there were no signs of a struggle, suggesting they were surprised by the cold-blooded killers. He added, "It looks as if they've been enticed down there, or they may have even arranged to be down there." And he added, "The 3 men are known to us as criminals. They were understood to all come from Essex. The Range Rover had to stop at a 5-bar gate, which was locked. On the other side of it were fields leading to the trout pond." Mr. Dibley said, "The wounds are consistent with wounds from a shotgun." He added, "There is quite a lot of blood contained in the vehicle." Mr. Dibley said that at least 1 shotgun was used and the majority of its force was contained inside the vehicle. The condition of the body suggested they had been killed on Wednesday night or early yesterday. All 3 had been shot through the head. And he added, "Whoever killed 3 people are clearly very dangerous, and to that extent I am concerned that they are at large." Police, who sealed off the area after the bodies were found, were carrying out a careful search of the area looking for clues. Post-mortem examinations are due to be carried out today. The killers chose the perfect spot. Viewed from the air yesterday, it became clear that the murder scene was carefully picked out. The Range Rover used in the executions was parked at the only place shrouded by trees on a remote farm track. After the shooting, the killers simply had to walk 200 yards back down the lane to jump into a getaway car waiting on the busy A130. Yesterday, forensic experts were conducting an inch-by-inch search of the track looking for the killer's footprints frozen in the ice. Whoever shot the men probably walked past White House Farm, which borders the track and the A130. The farm is now the centre of police activity. 8 squad cars and a white-painted police instant caravan were parked in the yard. A team of 6 police officers could be seen carrying out the gruesome task of examining the area immediately around the Range Rover, which was left near a gate which blocks the track. Officers were picking through 6 inches of snow and mud, looking for cartridges from the shotgun. Fragments of glass from a window shattered by the gun blasts were also being recovered in the hope they may hold some clue to the identity of the gunman. Policemen believe that they may have been injured by flying glass and could have left traces of blood. The next newspaper article comes again from the 8th of December 1995 with the headline, "Ecstasy barons are executed in lane." 3 men shot dead in a gangland-style execution in a lover's lane were high-level drug dealers but had no known link with tragic teenager Leah Betts, the officer leading the inquiry into the killings said this afternoon. Media speculation about any link with the case of Leah, who died after taking an ecstasy tablet and collapsing at her 18th birthday party, might divert attention from the murder inquiry, said the man leading the hunt, Detective Superintendent Ivan Dibley. The scene is just a few miles from where Leah lived, but Mr. Dibley told a news conference there was nothing to suggest at the moment that they distributed drugs to Leah or her associates. Newspaper reports today had said that the 3 were suspected of being involved in supplying the drug to Leah, who is thought to have obtained it at a Basildon nightclub. Police earlier today visited Leah's parents, the teenager's father is a former police inspector, to keep them abreast of the situation, said an Essex police spokeswoman.